Hello and welcome to the Action Network podcast, UFC betting preview. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward to help you break down a 13 fight card this weekend, this Saturday at the Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. 7 p.m. prelims, 10 p.m. six-fight main card at the Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you'd like to tell some of the bets that we discuss on today's show, make sure to find the quick slip links both in the podcast and video description or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Final card of the 2026 UFC calendar. Should get our goodbyes and thank yous out of the way from the jump if you have tuned in. If you've tuned in at any point during the year, if you've contributed to sharing this show or watching this show, producing this show, all the people that we have on the back end taking care of business, thank you for tuning in and helping this show grow throughout the 2026 or 2025 year. We'll see you again in 2026. But with that said, a full 13 fight card to break down for UFC Vegas 112. In the main event, a flyweight bout between Brandon Royval and Manel Kape. Allegedly, is what Billy put in the sheet. Allegedly, Manel Kape will be fighting on Saturday night because Kape has had as many canceled bouts. He's had 9 canceled bouts and 9 completed bouts in the UFC since joining over from Risen in 2019. 4 of those 9 cancellations, though, were his fault. So 5 were not his fault. Did have a PED suspension. He's had a weight miss and then he's withdrawn from a pair of fights with injury. These two were supposed to fight, I believe, in March and then again in June. Either fighter separately pulled out with an injury in either contest. Now, Kape in his recent bouts has picked up the pace a little bit across his UFC career, averaging about 5 distance strikes per minute. But his past 2 contests, he's increased that rate closer to 6.5. Royval is the more voluminous striker across their respective careers. He also has the better margin per minute, lands 8.8 distance strikes per minute, outpaces opponents by 2.1 strikes per minute. Not sure if this was in Billy's luck ratings this week, though, but Royval has won 3 split decisions. Manel Kape lost a split decision. So even though Royval tends to outpace his opponents, outstrikes them at distance, he doesn't carry a ton of power on his shots. It's a lot of pitter patter, a lot of touching opponents with jabs and straights. Doesn't necessarily score as big with the judges as you might expect, considering the raw numbers, the raw total number of strikes. Now, Manel Kape is going to have more power. If Royval is going to come forward, Royval is going to get countered hard because he has just a 43% striking defense rate. He's very open, very hittable, and Kape has a significant power advantage here. So I think Kape is going to hurt Royval early. There's a potential that Royval could rally late in the fight, win the championship rounds. He does have more championship round experience. He's been to 5 rounds in 3 of his past 4 fights. I believe Kape hasn't been to a 4th or 5th round since 2015 or 2017. So potential Royval could rally late here down the stretch. I do like Kape to win the early minutes, though, and potentially find a finish earlier on in the fight. Royval, a very public underdog selection this week. Fans, bettors picking him to win this bout about 45% of the time compared to implied odds nearer to 30%. As a result, my model makes Kape around an 80% favorite, minus 395 implied. I'd bet him up to minus 345 straight. I would use him as a parlay piece to minus 375. And then concerning the takedown props, Kape over half a takedown, plus 120. Royval under half a takedown, minus 180. They actually have the same average of takedowns at distance throughout their respective UFC careers, both averaging about a half a takedown attempt per 5 minutes at distance. Kape, though, looking at his other matchups where he has attempted takedowns, it's when he's going against other high volume strikers in order to break up that pressure, just mix things up. If they scramble back to their feet, fine, but at least he's done something to change levels and give them something else to think about. I think Kape, with Royval coming forward, may shoot a takedown here, but if Royval shoots takedowns and Royval doesn't attempt takedowns for a guy who can submit people nearly as much as you'd expect, Royval, I don't think is necessarily going to get them. We've seen much improved takedown defense and just a clear physicality edge for Kape in this matchup. So laying the juice with the favorite. I took both underdogs in both the co-main event and the main event last weekend. I think the underdog here is just a little bit too public, in my opinion. Certainly get the arguments for Brandon Royval. Billy is going to go ahead and make those arguments. Specifically, the plus 9.5 points at even money, I think might be the best way to bet Royval if you're going to play him. Even though I think Kape is capable of getting the early finish, this one does go all 25 minutes. it's difficult to imagine Royval not winning at least one of the 5 rounds across a 25-minute fight. So Billy, Royval plus 9.5 at even money. His money line at plus 225. Where would you play those in terms of juice, respectively? And then how did you break this one down?
Yeah, I haven't actually bet the money line yet myself. I'm still kind of kicking that one around. I probably wouldn't under normal circumstances, but I'm so jealous that I played the plus 9.5 on Piotr Jan last week, and you went with the decision prop, the money line, and we had similar reads, but you made way more money off of it. So that's a little bit of FOMO on that one for the money line straight up on Royval. Uh, the big thing for me here is that Royval has been finished twice in his career. Once was a shoulder injury, and once he got pretty blatantly poked in the eye right before the finish. So he's never like really been stopped. And Kape has finished a lot of people, but we've seen him in tougher matchups kind of stare at Muhammad Mokaev for a while. The people he finished in recent fights aren't as impressive of opponents as Royval is or has been fighting. So that's the big takeaway for me. I just think the market thinks Royval is easier to finish than he is because they see those two stoppage losses on his record. To your point about these split decisions, Royval does so much more that I think sometimes he steals some split decisions he probably doesn't deserve just on volume output, where, as we've both pointed out, Cop will stare at you for a little while. So that's probably part of it. I don't think that's a huge factor. Cop's we'll win some rounds pretty cleanly, but we just need one out of Royval and to make it the distance. So I take the plus 9.5 down to about minus 135, minus 140. Have not jumped on the money line yet. I think I actually want it to get a little bit higher than the 225. And if we see that, I might jump in.
Co-main event for Saturday, Giga Chikadze against Kevin Vallejos in the featherweight division, a 13-year age gap between these two combatants. Giga, though, is the taller man, 5 inches taller, a 6-inch reach advantage. And considering the age gap, I do expect him to fade in the back half of the fight, but I do think round one is going to be close to 50-50, considering the size differential of Vallejos trying to figure out how to get in the pocket and box Giga up potentially. If not, mix in some grappling. I do expect that first round to be competitive. Vallejos, I think, should take over after that point. So Vallejos minus 300 pre-fight. I do project as the value side. Would use it possibly as a parlay piece. I think you'll find a better number live after round one, though. And then his round two prop is 6-1. His round three prop is 10-1. I don't really like them far below where they are currently. I probably wouldn't play them below 5-1, 9-1, respectively. And even that is getting a little too far. I think 6 and 10-1 respectively is probably where I'm most comfortable betting them down to. I would maybe fudge them a little bit beyond that, but Vallejos live and late is how I would consider playing this fight. Billy, you also like Vallejos in
Mhm.
this matchup, but you do like Giga to potentially clear his over under for a significant strike. So expecting a high paced war between this pair where Vallejos ultimately sees his hand raised. Do you also see him finding a late finish? Or do you think
Yeah.
this one goes to decision and Giga just loses a 29-28?
I'm not as confident on a finish. I am fairly confident that the success Giga has will be early. I
Mhm.
think he will land a lot of pitter patter shots on the outside, especially kicks, as Vallejos looks to work his way in. This one that I have in the sheet specifically, if you pair Vallejos' money line with Giga's 30 plus strikes, not significant strikes, just strikes in general, he landed like 15 insignificant, for lack of a better term, ground strikes from his back in the last fight, and he'll do that. He'll kind of just smack you in the head when he's on his back. And Vallejos wrestled in his last fight. So my logic here is if Vallejos is winning rounds because of his takedowns, Giga's probably piling up some insignificant strikes. I also think he'll land plenty of significant strikes on the feet in the early portions of the fight. So this is kind of a risk reward thing. If you want to up the strikes numbers or go significant instead of insignificant, you can get better prices on this. I'm taking the easy or the safer route with the money line and Giga 30 plus. And then I'm 100% with you that Vallejos live, I think he'll take over as the forward pressure breaks Giga down, as Giga kind of falls apart. We've never seen him finished in the UFC, but he's 37, has had a bunch of injuries, cuts a ton of weight to make the weight class. It's going to happen eventually. It feels like Vallejos is the kind of guy who would do it. So I like your round two and round three props. But you're right, though. These aren't great prices against a guy who's never been finished in MMA, so it's hard to push those too much farther.
Yeah, Calvin Cater close to finishing Giga at the
Hmm.
bell after slicing him up with elbows for 25 minutes. Giga looked like he'd been in a car crash after that fight. But yeah, showed up pretty good survivability despite gassing out after like the first round of that fight and then eating a ton of damage, but is in his late 30s now. I believe he pulled out of his last fight with injury. I think nearing the end of his combat sports career, very likely, not just the MMA experience, but also the kickboxing background as well. If he doesn't hit Vallejos with a liver kick here, I think this goes very poorly for him. Should mention or just reiterate the age gap because this isn't the only fight that we're going to discuss that has a significant age gap. When there's at least a 12-year age gap between MMA opponents, the younger fighter wins about 72% of the time at average odds closer to minus 150, which is 60% implied. So about a 12% advantage historically betting on the younger fighter when there's at least a decade of experience between the relative opponents. Football season's here, folks. We've got huge improvements and updates coming to the award-winning Action Network app, which we're very excited to discuss in the weeks ahead. But to get the most out of the app, you'll still need to be an Action Pro subscriber, and it's only with Action Pro. You get real-time pick alerts from me and the entire Action Network team of experts. Plus, you can access pro projections powered by Sean Kerner and our predictive analytics team, plus a ton of other benefits. And right now, Action Network podcast listeners can save $20 off the annual price of Action Pro. Just go to actionnetwork.com/pro and use code POD20 for $20 off the price of Action Pro. That's actionnetwork.com/pro. Use promo code POD20 for $20 off the annual price of Action Pro. Final underdog section of the 2025 UFC calendar. We're going to bleed a little bit into the top prop section as we near the end of these underdogs, as we typically do. But let's start off with the consensus underdog, the first one both of us put in the sheet for this card, which is Sean Sharaf against Steven Asplund in the heavyweight division. Asplund is 5 years younger. His lone loss came to Denzel Freeman, who was my best bet against Bulio a few weeks ago. Asplund also 6-0 as an amateur, had a 16-second win as an underdog on Contender Series. Very odd-looking body. He used to be, I believe, over 400 pounds. I think he's just like kind of a cardio kickboxer now, where Sharaf, to me, a little bit more developed, actually trains at Extreme Couture, whereas Asplund is out of a small gym in Minnesota, not training with UFC level fighters. I do think Sharaf is in a room, at least with guys who are this caliber and at this level. Had a short notice debut against Justin Tafa, won in the first round, I believe, or it was at least competitive in the
Yeah.
first round before getting knocked out in the second. Do have concerns about his cardio, and I do think Asplund could potentially take over the fight if this does extend. But Sharaf on the money line, I make him about plus 160. I'd like him down to plus 175. And then his inside the distance prop as well is sitting at about 3-1. I like him to potentially put away Asplund early, and Asplund live could be an angle as well if this fight does extend beyond the opening 5 minutes. So, Billy, did you have a similar read here concerning Sharaf's early finishing upside, the relative training scenario for both fighters, and then Asplund's ability to take over the fight late?
The training was a big part of it. I actually am going to push back a little bit on Asplund to take over late.
Hmm.
Sharaf's cardio might be terrible, or he might have had an adrenaline dump because he almost finished Tafa at the bell in
Hmm.
his debut. He was bombing on him. Tafa clearly saved by the bell. Asplund in the one pro fight he had where he was forced to grapple against Denzel Freeman, gassed out immediately once he was taken down. As you point out, great cardio kickboxer. He calls himself Fat Max Holloway. He can throw medium power punches all day. If you make him grapple at all, I think he's going to gas out. So I actually think if there's any grappling, Sharaf will take over in that department. And Sharaf just might have better cardio when it's not his debut on 3 days' notice and he gets super excited about a finish that doesn't materialize. That last part might still happen, but it's not his debut. It's not short notice. He's been out for almost maybe over a year. It was, a while ago when he made that debut against Tafa. You would imagine they worked on some cardio because he was dominating that fight and just ran out of steam. So with you, conceptually, I actually think Sharaf, at the very least, might have decent cardio. He might not. That might just be who he is. He's never won a fight, that went past a minute or so into the second round. So you never know, but
Yeah, also 5-year age gap here, but it is 32 and
heavyweight doesn't matter.
27, which for heavyweight, I actually kind of prefer the guy who's 32
Mhm.
and fully filled out, whereas Asplund, I think, is probably 3 to 5 years away from his prime potentially as a fighter. So Sharaf fully developed, better camp, taking him at plus money here. Another fight, short notice booking Bobby Green against Lance Gibson Jr. This is a catch weight at 160 pounds. Green was not scheduled to fight anybody. This was just purely a late notice booking. Bobby was supposed to fight Diego Ferreira in August. He ended up pulling out with an injury. He had that awful KO against Mauricio Hufi last year, or earlier this year. It was in March. That looked like it could have been a potential career-ending knockout. He had that awful knockout against Jalen Turner in 2023. So at this point, with two brutal knockouts in the past 2 years, I think it's very possible that Bobby is just completely shot. He should look a little bit slower coming back here in his late 30s after another brutal knockout loss. Gibson, the much younger man, 9 years younger. He's 30 years old, should be fully developed as a prospect. And even though he's coming from a smaller gym, Lance Gibson's dad, Lance Gibson Sr., was a UFC fighter. He ended up facing Dan Severn in Guam as an like earlier in his career pre-UFC days. They had a 26-minute match. Like fighting up, against heavyweight Dan Severn is pretty wild. Those were the early days at MMA, the weightless rule set. And his stepmom is Julia Budd, who's a former five-time, four-time Bellator champion. So I'm pretty confident that they will have this kid prepared adequately for a UFC level opponent. Obviously, we've seen a ton from Bobby. We haven't seen a ton, or we haven't seen anything from Gibson at this level. But I do think the shotness level, or the shotness potential for Bobby is kind of off the charts here. I actually think he's going to get grappled, and I think Gibson is going to potentially finish him on the ground via ground and pound. So Lance Gibson Jr. down to about plus 150 in this catchweight, the short notice catchweight bout against Bobby Green. Billy, were you able to do any work, any tape for this fight? And do you have any reads or bets for this one?
I didn't, but I'm 100% with you. And the only thing I'll add is at this point in their respective careers, on like a random Monday in December, who do we think's going to be in better shape and training harder? King Green or a guy trying to break into the UFC? Obviously B. So like the short notice, if anything, only helps Gibson. I actually have met Bobby. I don't know him well. Has never struck me as the guy who's going to be just grinding as hard as he can 365 days a year. Like he's coming for that money when there's a fight on the schedule, not necessarily always getting after it as hard as possible. So that's the other factor I'll throw in there.
Yeah, it kind of felt like he just wanted a paycheck before
Hmm.
Christmas. Maybe he had splurged
Yes.
a little bit on gifts this year and needed a little bit of money to get in the cage one more time. But like it's awkward because he wasn't booked against anybody and they booked it so late. And he also had that injury that he had to withdraw from in August. So I think all of those factors, on top of the
Hmm.
brutal knockout against Hoofy in March, are just kind of lining up against Green's chances in this fight. Another short notice booking, Joe Anderson Brito against Isaac Thompson in the featherweight division. Now, Brito was supposed to fight Melsik Bagdasaryan, so he was booked on this card. Thompson getting the short notice call from LFA. Brito's 2 inches shorter, does have a 3 inch reach advantage. Thompson is 7 years younger. He's well rounded, has good cardio. I do think, though, he's probably going to need to rally in the second half of the fight because Brito is always a handful early. He's extremely physical, strong. That physicality does tend to fade a little bit in the second half of this fights and could open the door for somebody to rally late against him. We don't have props here yet. I'm probably most interested if we can get a decent price on it on the over 1.5 or a fight to go to decision prop. If I can get plus money there, or Thompson down to about plus 150 on the money line. I still need to adjust these late notice booking, the Green Gibson fight, the Burrito Thompson fight, even the Asplin fight to a degree. I still had missing data points on public prediction data out there. So I do need to adjust. I mean, Gibson, I'm going to be betting. I need to adjust the Thompson fight specifically because I just have less confidence in him, especially early against Brito. Maybe a live bet on Thompson. Maybe, as I said, betting totals on this fight instead could be the approach. But Brito against Isaac Thompson. Billy, any thoughts, reads, or bets for you here?
Yeah, I'm gonna have some Thompson and DFS. We had like the reverse scenario we normally get. Normally a fighter comes in and changes because Brito was supposed to fight on this card. Thompson was not. He's supposed to fight Melsik Bagdasaryan. Usually a new fighter comes in and we get a way better money line odds on the remaining fighter. Opposite happened here. Brito actually is at worse odds against his new opponent than he was against his old, which means his new opponent is cheaper than they should be in DFS because DraftKings was kind of stuck in a corner with how to price those guys. So that is where my exposure will come from, but that's just a systematic thing. We get one guy too cheap for his money line odds. I'm going to take it.
Yeah, very interesting that Thompson is a shorter priced underdog than Melsick was. I think it's pretty well known that Melsick is grappleable, where
Mhm.
Thompson, as I said, a bit more well-rounded, is going to force a striking fight where he might have more volume and Brito is probably going to have more power. So if Thompson is able to survive this thing early, as I said, I think he could potentially rally late. It's just the short notice aspect may even up the cardio to the point where he's unable to. But overs in what I'm targeting in that matchup. We're going to begin to straddle the prop section a little bit with the final two underdog picks here. Luana Santos against Melissa Croden in the bantamweight division. We both successfully bet Croden in her UFC debut against Tainara Lisboa. Santos finished Lisboa quicker, but she also lost very decisively to Casey O'Neill earlier in her career. And I don't really rate her wins against the Gapaba, Stephanie Egger, who shortly retired thereafter, Juliana Miller, who I believe is no longer with the promotion. Cronin is the bigger fighter. 1 inch reach advantage, 3 inches taller. Looks very strong for the division. I think this fight, though, is going to come down to her takedown defense because Santos has shown the ability to control opponents for extended stretches, 8 to 10 minutes in almost all of her fights. If she can land takedowns, she's going to cover her price. But if not, I think this is a 50-50 striking match on the feet. So Croden, the underdog side of the money line for me here. I would consider playing her. I want to actually see where I have her projected because I didn't write down a price target. I make her a slight favorite. I make Croden minus 104. So anything plus 105 or better on Melissa Scare Croden. Billy, though, you're going to take the under 2.5 rounds between these fighters at close to 2 to 1. Who do you think? I would assume Santos is likelier to finish the fight considering she's the favorite. But if you had to choose a side of the money line, where are you going?
I'm 100% with you on Croden. I came into breaking down this fight expecting to bet Croden. That was my plan. And then I saw what the over-under was set at, and it being nearly double the payout is a straight bet on Croden was just too good to pass up. Croden has finished every one of her professional wins. Santos has 3 finishes in her 4 UFC wins, 2 of those on the ground, where Croden is, in theory, more beatable. And Croden is a big, strong, scary striker who can knock people out. So it seems like the relative strengths are fairly binary. I also worry about Croden, as big and strong and aggressive as she is, tiring out and getting tapped late or beaten late. You could go fight doesn't go to the decision rather than the under 2.5, but those last 2.5 minutes aren't super likely to have a finish. So I am with you, and I will probably have like a little bit of a sprinkle on Croden by finish specifically. I just thought that price shouldn't be that much better than Croden's money line, considering she's finished every win of her career.
Final fight from a underdog perspective, but also our one consensus fight from a prop perspective. That's Kennedy and Nzechukwu against Marcus Buchecha Almeida. Second UFC bout for Buchecha. It's fourth degree black belt, 27 gold medals in international jiu-jitsu competition, IBJJF Hall of Famer, two-time ADCC winner, but wasn't able to do much against a very thick Martin Budai in his first fight. Hopefully going up against Kennedy and Nzechukwu, who's a former light heavyweight, much lankier. He's able to grapple him, find the back, potentially lock in a rear naked choke. Kennedy's, as I said, the lankier man, 3 inches taller, has a 6 inch reach advantage, 80% takedown defense for his career, but I don't think he's necessarily strong enough or big enough for these heavyweights. There should be a 20-pound weight differential here. I actually make Buchecha the favorite in the fight. I make him minus 112. I make his submission prop. Let's see where I put that. I make his submission prop plus 205. I make his inside the distance prop plus 150. So you can bet the ITD prop around plus 165. You can bet the sub prop around plus 240, I believe. And then his round one prop, Billy and I both like as well. His round one sub prop, I think, is plus 400. His round one prop is plus 380. He did try to go for ground and pound in that last fight against Budai. So considering the minimal price differential, just go ahead and play the ITD prop or the round one prop. If we're talking about ITD versus sub, there is a little bit more meat on the bone for the sub prop relative to the ITD prop. But the round one versus round one sub prop seems to be in a very similar price positioning. So Buchecha, the side for me here is an underdog, but very much prefer his finish props or his round one prop. Again, plus 165 inside the distance, plus 380 to win in round one. Billy, you have Buchecha round one sub as your top prop on the sheet. Again, the round one prop,
Yeah.
much not much different in terms of pricing, but what I'm most curious about in terms of your analysis here is how you see this fight playing out after the 5 minute mark.
Yeah, so I bet the round one sub at plus 400. If you make a DraftKings SGP and do under 5.5 minutes, which gives you, an extra 30 seconds, that brings the round one sub to plus 450, which is enough for me to do that, especially because you get the extra 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very worried if this goes past 5 minutes. I don't think it's not that I think Bucecic's cardio will fail. It's that it's like a conditional probability problem for me here. If he is not able to take him down and finish him early, he's almost certainly not going to be able to take him down and finish him later, and then things will only get worse from there. He might have great cardio. I don't know. Usually, pure jiu-jitsu guys don't because they've always competed in one round events for the majority of their career and don't really have that recoverability. Even if they can do a longer round, they don't have that comebackness, for lack of a better term. So that scares me. But yeah, I think if Buchecha is going to win, it's going to be early, probably going to be a submission. I'd consider a live bet on Nzechukwu if somehow Buchecha gets a takedown and he survives. Then yeah, absolutely a live bet on Kennedy because it's only going to get worse. Only thing I will say, Nzechukwu just got heel hooked by Walter Walker. Everybody gets heel hooked by Walter Walker. I understand that. But man, if he can submit you, you'd think like one of the greatest heavyweight submission grapplers of all time could find a submission as well, right? Like if we had Buchecha versus Walter Walker in IBJJF rules, Buchecha would be like minus 400,000. Like it wouldn't even be, it'd be like Buchecha going with me. It wouldn't matter who else you put in there. So I know the transitive property doesn't always follow that way, but it really, you got to think it does here.
Let's finish up with our top prop fights. We got three more before we pivot. I believe four more actually before we pivot to our best bets as we cover all 13 fights on this final card of the year. Let's discuss Milk Costa against Morgan Charrier. Costa 2 inches taller, 2 inch reach advantage, also a bit more well-rounded, but Charrier just the more physical athlete, more power. I think his physicality here should be enough to deny takedowns. 83% takedown defense for his career, just 58% for Costa. Higher control rate for Charrier in grappling exchanges, 63% for Charrier, 40% for Costa. The issue is the volume, the differential per minute. Costa outlanding opponents by 3.2 strikes per minute. Charrier getting outlanded by 0.4. This is going to be a minutes versus moments fight where Charrier's power is going to get weighed against Costa's volume. I do make Charrier's decision prop though about 2 to 1. You can get as high as plus 275. I would take that down to plus 225. Charrier by decision plus 225. Billy likes Charrier's takedown over 1.5 takedowns is plus money. Where do you like that too, Billy? And then how do you see the fight playing out?
Yeah, I think Charrier is just gonna kind of bully wrestle him. He's so much bigger and stronger, and Costa is a good grappler who likes to play grappling. Like he'll kind of sorta accept being down there so he can go for submissions and roll around with you, which, Charrier can use to just get on top and control the situation, as you were pointing out, which also I think lends nicely to the Charrier decision bet that you're on. At one point, you could get the just one takedown on Charrier at like minus 120 or something stupid. So I got a ton on that. They adjusted. We play this game. I think the two takedowns, I'd go up to about minus 130 or so. If they adjust it where it's 2.5 is the prop, then I definitely want plus money. But we'll see how those continue to move and where the money comes in throughout the week. But I'm with you on your read on the fight. I think your read also lends itself well to Charrier picking up some takedowns along the way.
Binary striker versus grappler bout between Amanda Lemanoche and Jillian Robertson. Strawweight bout. Robertson is 8 years younger. Lemanoche has a 2 inch reach advantage. Robertson used to be very aggressive, hunting for submissions, finishes from top. She's now prioritizing positioning a little bit more, and I think that's how she wins this fight via decision. The goes to decision is plus money. Robertson by decision is plus 280. I make her decision prop. Let's see where I set that. I make her decision prop plus 210. So I'd bet that down. Also do about plus 225 like I would with the Charrier fight. And the GTD prop I would take at plus money as well. I think Lemos could absolutely finish her on the feet. If she's unable to get takedown, she's much more dangerous And if Robertson, is able to get on top, she could absolutely find a finish from top. But we've seen much better survivability from Limoges on bottom in her recent matchups. Spent 16 minutes getting controlled by Wiley Zhang, 6 by Mackenzie Dern, 6.5 by Verda Jandaroba, 4 by Yasmin Lucindo in a fight she won, and then 9.5 minutes in her last fight against Tatiana Suarez. She has a good guillotine. She has ways to find a submission from bottom, but ultimately, I think she's just going to wait for opportunities for the round to end, look to close the show on the feet before she's taken down at the start of those rounds by Robertson. And once she is taken down, I think she's going to end up spending a lot of time on her back in this fight. So Robertson to win a control-based, control-oriented decision. Average strawweight bout goes to decision at a 66% clip. Again, we're getting plus money. This is a binary fight, but still getting plus money on this one to do so. Lemos against Robertson, Billy. Wouldn't have been surprised if he had the under here because it is very binary, but they also are making you pay for it at about
Yeah.
minus 145. Do you have any bets on this fight, or do you think it's correctly lined and you're just passing?
I do not have any bets on this fight. I went into it looking to bet some Jillian Robertson takedown ladders, props, whatever. You got to start with 4+ takedowns. That's the lowest one they'll even give you, which
Mhm.
tells you how the books think that it's going to go, which also makes Jillian Robertson a great DFS fighter because she could rack up a ton of takedowns. And as you've pointed out, even though you're not as much of a DFS guy, the field underplays women fairly consistently. So Robertson's not that expensive compared to some of the other high-end fighters. Could end up with 4, 5, 6 takedowns here, which would almost certainly get her in the optimal lineup. So
And if you're
that
betting
will
the
be my
under
exposure.
in the if you're betting the under in the Croden fight, it means that you like those women as well potentially in
Hmm.
DFS
Yeah.
lineups too, right? Because if they're going to be finishing that fight, one of them is likely to be in the optimal lineup.
Yeah, Croden and Robertson specifically are two of my most owned players. It looks like it's going to be with um, a little bit of Santos, not so much Lemos. I don't really believe in her anymore at this point in her career. But again, all the above going to be under owned and have more upside than we normally expect from lighter weight class women's fights. Well, Croden not lighter weight class, but in this one specifically.
One of my bigger DFS UFC DFS successes last week. It was I mean I had like 50 lineups, but it was a lot of Jan and Van in the lineup together.
Mhm.
And those obviously ended up paying out significantly because I think they were both under 7,000 in terms of salary. And then I was
Yeah.
combining them with the women's fights, and I was like these two with the expensive female fighters, and we were trying to play around with the less obvious fighters being selected. I think that's ultimately how you profit. And like when you're selecting DFS lineups, Billy, when you're putting lineups together. Obviously, I know you project out ownership, but are you
Mhm.
also like even beyond that, just trying to like go with fighters that you think, yeah, even beyond the projecting out the ownership, like just trying to be contrarian? Is that like your um number one goal when you're building out lineups for tournaments is just contrarian?
It's my number one goal on some of the smaller cards when we have like definitely less than 12, up to like 12 fights. I think it should be primary goal because you don't like a win that you chop with 10 other people. Like I had the optimal with my cash game lineup a few weeks back and like what should have been a 10K win paid out $800 because everyone was on it. So it wasn't really worth it. On the bigger cards, I don't think it's as important just because there's more total permutations that can be made, so I don't stress it as much. And another way to be contrarian, even if all your individual fighters are popular, is just leave some salary on the table, which you
Mhm.
very well might have with the Yan Van combination. Probably just kind of by definition had to leave some salary on the table. So that's a good one. My hot take on the Roto Grinders expert survey this week is actually that the optimal lineup will leave at least $500 of salary on the table, and nobody will be on those combinations, even if each of the people individually is somewhat popular.
Yeah, a lot of the lineups that I had started out with Yan, Van, Turner, and Mansoor. I was like two first round finishes, two underdogs, who I think, and then we just went from there. And even though I had the over 1.5s in both the Turner, I had the over 1.5 in the Turner fight. I had Mansoor round one KO, of course. So I'm mad at myself for not recommending Mansoor round one submission because I talked about a guy who was potentially rigging fights to go over 1.5 previously. How did I not take his submission prop at plus 950 or whatever it was when the knockout prop was around even money? Very obviously, a dude who has been potentially match fixing recently may coordinate with his opponent who's about to get cut on cashing a plus 950 sub ticket, let alone whatever the round one sub odds were from there. But just a lesson for future reference. Definitely, if you're aware that a fighter might be match fixing, but you think they may try to actively finish a fight this time, take the longer odds finish prop. That's a lesson for all of us. UFC debut I'm very excited for this weekend. Yaroslav Amosov going up against Neil Magny. If you need to make a fighter look good, if you want to give them potential highlight, give them Neil Magny for their UFC debut. But Amosov, 28-1 in his career, former Bellator welterweight champion. There was a time where he was considered potentially the best 170-pound fighter on the planet outside of Kamaru Usman, outside of Leon Edwards. He did end up losing his second fight back after serving in the Ukraine-Russia war. Looked good in his first fight back, ended up getting knocked out in his second fight back, but followed that up with a KO win in CFFC versus Curtis Millender in his last fight, UFC veteran Curtis Millender. I view Amosov as a parlay piece this weekend. I make his money line close to minus 500, but I prefer his point spread. The minus 7.5 points is minus 135. I think he wins a clear 30-27 decision here or submits Magny. And if he's going to submit Magny, I think he does it in the first 7.5 minutes of the fight. So potentially an SGP, Amosov under 1.5 rounds. The parlay piece, as I said, or the minus 7.5 point spread at minus 135. I probably like up to minus 150. Billy, Yaroslav Amosov, do you think this guy has championship potential at the 170-pound division? And how do you like this fight to play out?
Yeah, I wouldn't quite go that far. Like 170 is pretty stacked right now, so it just feels tough to say that about any newcomer. But Neil Magny, the only guys he's lost to are all outside of Gilbert Burns. His last five losses have been to people currently ranked in the top six. And Burns was at the time. Like he was, a fight or two away from a title fight. So if you beat Neil Magny, even to this day, you're still probably a top 10 guy kind of instantly because Magny's coming off a couple wins over people we thought maybe could have been top 10. And then Magny says, no, you're not. I love your angle here. I spent much of the week debating whether I think he can get a finish or not, or just dominate. Minus 7.5, you kind of cover both those. He wins 30-27, so you got it. A finish, you also get it. I think that's the best way to play it. I've debated that myself, so I like where you're coming in at. Also was going to look at Amosov takedowns. Those props are still not up, so that might be something I'm in on later in the week. Or not later in the week, later in the day if they come up in time. And it's a lower level Apex card. I'm going to get out of here for 6 weeks kind of thing. The DraftKings props team might also just say, you know what, we're not doing all these this time. We're gonna get in early or get out early, I should say.
This is going to end in one of those sequences where both fighters are going for a front choke and just kind of rolling in that position. And Amasov is the one who locks it up. They both like those positions. The
Hmm.
Bravos, the Ninja Chokes, those are their favorite choke series. So yeah, I could see them just kind of rolling in a weird scramble, and it ends up finishing via submission. Fight to end via submission could be an interesting prop to play as well, because I think if Magny wins the fight, I
Magny's
actually think
gonna,
it's
yeah.
finding some sort of submission against Amosov in a scramble. I don't really see him winning a decision here. Even though he has 3 inches taller, 5-inch reach advantage, Amosov should land the takedowns, end up on top for much of this fight. Maybe Magny locks something up from bottom, but otherwise I think he loses a one-sided decision or finish. We're going to progress to our best and final bet section, but Billy also has, or I should say, I also have one more fight I want to talk about from a prop perspective, which is Alan Fry Jr. against Guilherme Pat. Billy's going to discuss Pat as his best bet, and I should also mention Fry is a very public underdog this weekend. My model makes Pat about minus 215. I bet him up to minus 200, but I also do like the overs and the goes to decision in this fight as well. Pat by decision at plus 750 is a huge number. This is potentially just a low pace Dana White Contender Series level fight since both guys have contracts. Heavyweight fights go to decision about a 40% clip. Both of these guys not only unbeaten, they have Pat has won a decision before, and Fry has been to the third round, I believe, twice. So these guys are very capable of competing in extended fights. They've shown that they have cardio that can extend, and neither has been finished in their respective careers. You're getting as high as, I believe, plus 380 on the fight to go to a decision. So the market's saying it's about a 21% probability. fights, heavyweight bouts, closer to 40%. I make this fight about 30%. So goes the decision plus 380, over 1.5 at plus money, and then Pat on the money line. I like to minus 200. Billy, you're going to go with Guillermo Pat as your best or final bet this weekend. So is it a best or final bet as your final bet of 2025? And then what did you see this fight in terms of the breakdown?
What I didn't see in this fight was like any tape on Alan Fry that wasn't just shot by his buddy through the cage wall. So that made this hard to break down from a like tape standpoint. The reason he's such a public underdog, both of these guys have fought really lower level competition, except Alan Fry has a win against Justin Frazier, who came into this fight 12-3 when he fought Alan Fry. He came into the fight 12-3 and was technically a UFC vet because he fought on The Ultimate Fighter and then on The Ultimate Finale where he lost and was removed from the UFC. So right, sounds like high level win. You beat this guy who was in the UFC, it's a good step up. Except Justin Frazier had not fought for 6 years and 4 months when he came in to do the job for Alan Fry. Like, I don't know why he came back after 6+ years. I haven't seen him since. That wasn't a legit fight against a active UFC level opponent. Um, Alan Fry, former basketball player, we know not a great base for MMA. It's no baseball, right? Like if he were a former single A pitcher, I'd be all over him, but the basketball players don't fare as
Don't
well.
disrespect Christian Leroy Duncan like that. Maybe you got to be a British basketball player in order to have it
Yeah,
register.
which still blows me away that that's even a thing you can be. But yeah. So again, Guillermo Pat is training in MMA, has been training in MMA for a long time, has some legit wins. If you go look at his Instagram, he's training with people who look like they know what they're doing. Looks great getting off the bus. Again, it's hard to give any stylistic takes because Fry's only fights have been recorded on somebody's shaky cell phone. But Pat looks just like a more legit MMA fighter here rather than a decently athletic basketball player who beat up an old guy for no reason.
If you're on Twitter, we have a great new feature. If you see a bet from any of your favorite action experts or anyone on gambling Twitter, you can now tag at Playbook and tell our bot to build you a bet slip. Add a book of your choice. It will build it out for you with a quick slip link that opens right up to your sports book. So keep an eye out for a new tool at Playbook on Twitter. I've got one best bet, one final bet before we get out of here. My best bet is going to come in the Cesare Oleksiejczuk versus Cesar Almeida fight, middleweight bout. Almeida, another public underdog this week, about 41% selected in my public sample, 35% implied on the money line. He's the better striker, but he's 12 years older. Cesare is also the bigger man, 2 inches taller, 1 inch reach advantage. He's been spending all of his time down with the fighting nerds. I think this kid is better than his brother McCall. If you followed
Yes.
me or my content, my UFC content over the past 5+ years, McCall Oleksiejczuk is probably my most frequently bet UFC fighter. I think this guy is generally underrated. I think Polish UFC fighters are generally underrated. Jan Blachowicz cashing as an underdog yet again this weekend. Jan has cashed so many times as an underdog. Other Polish fighters on the roster have cashed so many
Jan
times.
was a tie. Jan was a tie, no
I
cash.
apologize. Yes, he did win two
Pushing
of the
as an
three
underdog.
rounds. He did win
Yeah.
2 of the 3 rounds. He got 10-8 in the other. But yeah, like how many times are these
Same point.
Polish fighters going to cash and look undervalued in their matchups? Now, Cesare is a minus 200 favorite here, but as I've said, I think he is the better of the two Oleksiejczuk brothers because he can actually grapple and he actually has 15-minute cardio. He's the younger, faster, more dynamic athlete in this matchup. Not only is he 25 years old with 19 pro fights, he also had 31 amateur bouts. This guy has tons of fight experience. Almeida does have that kickboxing background, did fight Alex Pereira, but he's given up 14 takedowns and ceded 20 minutes of control time in his first 56 minutes of octagon time. I think he's going to get outgrappled here or potentially finished on the feet by a more dynamic and younger athlete. But this is an IQ test, in my opinion, for Cesare.
Yes.
Grapple your opponent who has shown the inability to deny takedowns from even lesser wrestlers than you are. Where do I have his money line projected? Let's see. I make him minus 250, so I would bet Cesare up to about minus 235 in this fight. Billy Cesare Oleksiejczuk against Cesar Almeida this weekend. How do you see this one playing out? And am I on the right side or do you like the dog?
I'm in theory 100% with you. I don't know that he's necessarily minus 200 to pass the IQ test is the
Mm.
problem. Like that's, and I don't mean that to be disparaging of his actual intelligence. I just think guy making his UFC debut, exciting striker. They match him up this way. Well, no, the reason they matched him up is because both their names are effectively Cesar, and the UFC just does that when they're out of ideas. Like if your name's Ebo, they're gonna give you Ewo and Eon because they why? Who cares? Like we're picking names out of a hat. Might as well pick the same name. We could pretend they're theoretically matching them up to make a fun striking match. Mikhail might just want to do that. He might want a 50 grand bonus more than he wants a 8 to 10K win bonus. Those are all concerns I have and a reason I'm not going to lay minus 200 on him. But you are 100% right in what should happen. Also hilarious, which one of these guys is the fighting nerd
Yeah.
when, like, because you'd get it wrong, right? If you didn't know that for some reason these Polish dudes have moved to Brazil to hang out with Caio Bahaio and wear silly glasses, you would just assume Cesar Almeida, striker from Brazil, looks like the whole rest of the team. It's not him though.
Another fight, final fight with another significant age gap. Teresa Bleda, 11 years younger than Jamie Lynn Horth, 2 inches taller, has a 5 inch reach advantage. Horth is the better striker, but Bleda is the stronger fighter, a very strong grappler, and she hasn't fought since June of 2023. So I'm expecting her to come back showing decent improvements, if not significant improvements, in her 20s. I think this ends up looking a lot like the Miranda Maverick fight for Horth. I think she's going to keep it competitive, but ultimately lose a 29-28, getting out grappled both in the clinch and on the mat. I make Bleda about minus 160. Her money line has gone up for minus 150 to minus 160. I'd still consider laying her money line small at minus 160 in the first fight on the card. So, Billy, any thoughts on Jamie Lynn Horth against Teresa Bleda?
Yeah, I do have a thought because I think I might be going crazy here. Tapology has no nickname listed for Teresa Bleda. Was she not one of the Rondas, Russian Rondas, Rondinas, Little Rondas at one point?
I
I
feel
thought
like
she was
you're,
one of those.
yeah, I feel like you're right. Yeah.
And I can't, I was trying to quickly search that while you did, while you were talking. Can't find it now. If I can confirm that, I will be betting Jamie Lynn Horth per my rule. We just we just don't do that around here. That's not a serious bet, not a serious take. I didn't really look into this fight. You're probably right, but if I can confirm that she once called herself some version of Ronda, despite being like a, whatever she was at the time, 4-0 pro MMA
He
fighter who
did.
was not in fact a judo Olympian, then we got to go against her.
I found an article from 2022. Blade is not even 21 years old yet, et cetera, et cetera. With the kind of record at this young, big things are in the future for Bleda. Her nickname is, quote, Rhonda, which is high praise, but it doesn't seem completely
Yep.
unwarranted. So, yes, she
And
did go by Rhonda and did remove it, I believe, after she ended up losing in the UFC.
all right, so I'm a little torn though because the growth it takes to remove Ronda is actually a really good sign. So we might have to be on Bleda, but also going with not even some variant of Ronda, but just Ronda. That's so stupid. Like at least the Stephanie Luciano is Rondinha, it's got a little Portuguese flair to it, or Russian Ronda.
Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, I don't like a lazy nickname. I do like personal growth though, so maybe I'm gonna be on Bleda here.
She's
I
emerged
talked
from
myself
her.
back all the way around. I talked the whole circle around that fight.
It's the Rhonda caterpillar, and she's now emerged into her post Rhonda butterfly as a fighter. So expecting improvements for Teresa Bleda now that she has shed the Rhonda label for this weekend. But that'll do
And
it for
maybe comes with a new nickname too. Like, let's see if we get Joe Martinez calling her something else. That'll be fun. I will happily take side bets in the Action Network Discord on what nickname she's going to come out with, if
yeah,
any.
Cesario Oksaychuk is going to need a nickname as well. His brother went from Lord Mikal to, oh, what does Mikal go by now?
Hussar,
Yes,
Hussar.
Hussar.
Yeah.
He's now Hussar. So I feel like Cesare is going to need a nickname if he's going to be as good as I think he will be at some point too. So going to need the email submissions to the UFC for both Cesare Oleksiejczuk and Teresa Bleda's nicknames. But Billy, this is our, as I said, our final card of 2026. We've gone through all 13 fights. Any final thoughts as we say goodbye to the folks for the winter?
Yeah, I've been looking forward to a little bit of a break here. Didn't realize it was going to be so long. So we will be out. I'm going to try to get out. perhaps with Sean or maybe John's involvement, a futures pick for some title fighters or some title fight futures we're looking to bet. That'll probably be the next piece of content. We also have allegedly Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua coming up. So I have a bet on that I've talked about. We will have some content around that as well. So we're not going anywhere. We'll have stuff coming out, and I appreciate everyone who's tuned in as well as interacted. I have a great time in the Discord and occasionally a great time in the YouTube comments. Not always. The YouTube comments have improved though. So shout out to everyone who listens. Appreciate you, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
Yeah, next card is on January 24th. It'll be the first card on Paramount Plus, Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett for the lightweight title, which is a card that will start at 9 p.m. Eastern. We're all going to start
Yes,
getting an hour of
love
sleep
that.
back on our pay-per-view watching. But that'll do it for our UFC betting preview, both for this Saturday and for 2025. You can find more UFC betting content on actionnetwork.com. If you'd like to instantly tell some of the bets that we discussed on today's show, look for the quick slip links both in the podcast and video description, or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app. Sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks and analysis. Best of luck with all your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening, both again this week and this year. We'll see you back here in late January to break down back-to-back pay-per-view cards for UFC 324 and 325. See ya.